Welcome to the Great Distraction.
How's it going, folks? This is The Great Distraction, and today the topic of discussion is hunting. My name is Ben, and with me today are my co-hosts Thomas,
How's it going?
Rick,
Hey, buddy.
and a special guest back with us, Matt.
I'm back.
If this is your first time listening, welcome. We thank you for joining us. The Great Distraction is a podcast that focuses on a vast and random range of topics, and we hope that each episode leaves you with, if nothing else, something to ponder. Before we get started, just a quick reminder, questions, comments, or topic suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. GreatDistractionPodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Facebook. Great Distraction. Make it real easy to remember there. So we wanted to bring Matt today, and we're happy, glad, lucky to have this guy here because this guy has actually worked in California anyway, in the hunting, wildlife, and parks and recreation too, right? Or,
California Department of Fish and Game.
there it is, the fishing game. I'm sorry, that's what I meant. So he's got some experience, and as a hunter, he can throw in that experience as well. So we're glad to bring him on this with his personal endeavors in that avenue. Let's get started by talking about types of hunting, because there's a few nomenclature I wanted to get out of the way. And I know that, especially here in California, we are very surrounded by a lot of anti-hunting mentality. I was born and raised that way myself, so I can definitely relate to that side of it. And there was a lot of myths and improper use of words and why people do it and meaning behind it that I kind of wanted to dispel right off the bat just by describing the types of hunting that typically gets done. Most of this is just going to be within the United States. However, some of it will cover worldwide. Right off the bat, I want to get out there fishing. There's actually two types, if you will, of categories for fishing. What we associate as the standard man or woman who goes out there with a rod, reel, and a hook and a line is actually called angling. You are still within the classification of being a fisherman, fisherwoman, but it is actually called, if you are using a hook, as I understand it, a hook of any kind, or an angled hook of any kind, I guess, you are actually an angler. However, you are a fisherman only, or a fisherwoman, if you are, say, using a net or crawdad traps, or using a net to catch crabs, or if you are going down and diving for abalone. Those are all fishermen or woman type things, but that's your classification. However, if you, like I said, if you're using a hook, you're angling. I did not realize that was the case, but there you go. Hopefully, you got educated.
Clear that up for
everybody.
everybody.
Let's clear that up for you.
Everybody who was wondering.
So as far as fishing goes, people will do catch and release is very, very popular. For those that don't know, you catch a fish, you pull the hook out, you throw it back, and that's it. The whole point of it was just kind of for the fun and the entertainment and the learning experience of learning how to do just that.
Or just being outside and enjoying it.
Well,
Absolutely.
that's definitely part of it, right? I mean, you get a nice quiet escape with yourself, by yourself, with your buddy, whatever. You and an ice chest full of beer and a sandwich.
I'd also like to mention there's a huge difference between fishing and catching.
Yes, I imagine so.
Well played.
Okay, there is trophy hunting, typically for big game, and usually they're to taxidermy afterwards and display, or sometimes, it depends on how much you pay for it and what you hunt. It's usually what you keep and what you want to eat. Speaking of eating, food. Some people just flat out hunt either to survive off of hunting if they live very, very rural. Or I suppose maybe even just don't really have much money. You can actually hunt and live off of the game.
Subsistive lifestyles
There you go.
require you to do that.
Yep. And then most people, from what I've read and from what I know, most people who hunt definitely eat their kill. I mean, they love whatever it is you hunt, you try and eat it, be it fish, be it venison. Sorry. Sport hunting. Again, this kind of goes back to the catch and release stuff in fishing. I imagine that there's competitive sport hunting. This part I don't know. For like deer hunting, how many points on the buck or
Absolutely.
Stuff like
They're
that.
all rated at their antlers give you a rating.
Okay.
There's world record holders here in California.
Okay.
We have excellent game here.
What else is typically sport hunted that I don't know? Like are bears sport hunted or?
Well, the difference between like sport fishing, like you're talking about the catch and release, and
Yeah.
hunting, you can never release your hunt game, right?
That's true. Yeah.
But let's break hunting down. There are actual categories of
Okay.
hunting. You have,
Shoot.
if you want to talk about mammal hunting, so you have mammals, and then you have your big game and mammal hunting are two different categories. Then you have your upland game, which is birds such as pheasants, dove, stuff like that, turkey. Those are upland game. And then you have your waterfowl, which is going to be your duck and your geese.
Okay, got it. Moving on, another category, predator removal. A lot of people, especially if you live in a more, well, it depends on how urban you live, right? If you live in a city and you know what living around rats is like, that'd be real nice to be able to shoot those bastards.
Yes.
But different than that, so kind of like as an extension of, it's interesting, a lot of the stuff we'll talk about with this topic is going to kind of go hand in hand, kind of like a vicious cycle. Some of the stuff that we do as modern humans to make our lives safer, it goes hand in hand with creating and supporting some of the very strongly some of the reasons why hunting is necessary. For example, in the case of predator removal, where we live, most people don't want to walk in their backyard one day and see a huge mountain lion chilling back there. So typically, as areas become more urbanized, human beings take it upon themselves to remove said predators. And when they do that, they hunt them down.
There's a big process in that too. So anytime you want to hunt an animal for predator control, it's actually it's called delineation.
Okay.
So you must acquire a delineation tag from the Department of Fish and Game, or Fish and Wildlife as we speak now. And then that tag does not allow you to keep any portion of that animal. So if there's coyotes in your area or mountain lions in your area, and they become a problem for either livestock or agriculture or human safety, you are required to have a delineation tag if you are a hunter. Or you could have Fish and Game come out if it's a serious issue. Like, we live in an extremely urban environment, but we also back up to very, very rural and agriculture areas. So the likelihood that a mountain lion could enter our facility that we're at now is highly likely. We wouldn't be the ones going out to fire on that. We would call the Fish and Game. They would come out, and one of their agents, or even the actual Department of Agriculture sends people out in this neighborhood, and they would delineate or dispatch the animal and then take it and dispose of it properly.
What do they do with it?
They're disposed of. They're taken down towards Rancho Cordova, where all the dead animals go.
Wow, I
Melt them
didn't
down.
even know we
into
had a facility to process them
all
like that.
roadkill, dead cows, dead horses, all animal livestock that dies on farms is taken down there. It's actually melted down. I don't know if that's the correct word, but
Chemically or flame, like
it's
heat?
it's boiled into a
gross.
protein. So everything is removed from it except for the protein, and that's what the substance in most of your dog food is.
Wow.
The inert ingredients. The inert ingredients in like the caulking you put around your windows comes from that plant. It's weird, but yeah, that's what.
Damn, my
Yeah.
house is waterproofed by dead animals.
I was listening to Steve Ranella talk, and he was saying that he has friends that are agents for probably wildlife, and part of their job is to track mountain lions or take them out when that's necessary. But as I understood in that conversation, they were allowed to harvest the meat from there, and they were claiming that it was actually good tasting meat, but it was just very rare that you could find anybody that would get some of that. So is that always the case that they're not, or is it just a California thing that they're not allowed to harvest any of the animal?
I can't speak to
point?
that outside of California because
Yeah.
I currently work for Department of Agriculture, and in Placer County we have 4 gentlemen that go out and track and dispatch wildlife that's either a nuisance or a danger to society. And then obviously we dispose of that. I have a farm a couple miles up the road, and we have a huge problem with coyotes. So we have to get delineation tags at certain times of year, and they say, okay, here's your tag. You could dispatch X amount of animals on your property. There's also the safety issue, like if you're out and you're currently practicing your farming activity and then the coyotes are up on your property, you could dispatch them on the spot because they're a danger to you immediately.
Yeah, an
without a
immediate
deletion tag, but you still have to report those and they still have to be removed from your property. You're not allowed to keep those.
And the delineation tag, that allows you as the landowner or whatever to
Correct.
take care of it? Okay, so you don't have to be like some sort of an official works for somebody or
yeah, the delineation tag is specifically for that only.
Oh, I see.
So it's
There's
your
one
land.
specifically for the civilian or whatever.
Yeah, if it's not if you need a Fish and Game to come out and do it, then there's no delineation tag. It's Fish and Game is
they
just
take
doing
care of
their
that.
job.
Got it.
Is it only you that can take the animals, remove them, or so anybody that you find, like you had a buddy or
Exactly.
you
Yeah,
hire
we have
someone.
5 or 6 people that we come out and we do our tags and hunt down the coyotes, and because they carry rabies. They're not good for your livestock. Smaller livestock they'll kill, but they can harm other livestock as well.
They're mean.
Yeah, it just has to be within your property line. So if you have 200 acres, don't go 201 acres out off your property line
shooting
and start
things off
shooting
your
animals.
property, yeah.
Has to be specifically on the property that was designated in the tag.
Can you bait them?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay, so along the opposite side of predator removal, when they are gone, there are certain circumstances that leads into another type of hunting, which is known as pest control. And oddly enough, we chose like the perfect weekend to record this because Rick just got back from one of these circumstances wherein they either pay or hire or ask people to come in, or sometimes people just handle it themselves to do pest control. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so we went out to a big farm outside of Winnemucca, and they had problems with prairie dogs. They're burrowing, and their equipment's kind of sinking into these big holes, and I'm sure the animals are doing something to the alfalfa. So yeah, they let people come out and shoot them. They said this was a bad year, but I felt like they were all over the place. It was like opening up a cockroach nest. They were just scattering everywhere.
Yeah, and I've heard of people. I wish it slipped my mind. I meant to look it up and write it down, and I can't remember if it was you that told me about it. So maybe or maybe it was Matt. I can't remember now. Up north in very top of Northern California, there's an annual event that goes on wherein people
squirrels?
Is it squirrels?
Is that what you're talking
It's
about?
it's a whole bunch of farms, whole bunch of ranches that all open up, and then basically you get they basically invite people to come out there and get these, either they're squirrels or maybe they're prairie dogs or maybe they're some sort of rodent up there. It's a huge event. You can find it on the internet. It's got a website or whatever, and people go up there and just hunt these things all day long, from a distance or whatever. They recommend what guns to take, what size scope, and basically a whole bunch of people meet in the middle of town, I guess, and from that own the different ranches and lands or whatever, and say, okay, I'll take 7 of you guys. You come with me, drive you out to my property, and have at it, or vice versa.
Yes, I know that was squirrels.
Is
and
it
it's funny
squirrels?
because so typically it's a 17 HMR or a 22 long rifle.
Yes,
those
that's
are
what
what
it
you
is.
want to use because it's a small animal. You want to disintegrate it.
Yeah.
And you can actually, they're good eating. Not for everybody, but they're actually pretty delicious. But it's hilarious. I don't say hilarious is the wrong word, but it's funny because it reminds me of like where the red fern grows. Remember the little scene where the boy and his grandpa and his dad take his dogs and they're going to do the raccoon hunting with their hound dogs, and then all these people are all at this one little stage, and they all put some little side money in a pot, and whoever gets the most raccoons wins. It's the same thing up there. It's whoever has the most squirrels can win a little extra prize money. It's
How funny.
it's pretty funny.
Make a competition out of it.
It is.
Yeah, and I've heard them doing that in swamp areas too with, I can't remember what animal it is that lives in the swamps. Not beavers, swamp rats. Anyway, they'll I wish I could remember where this one's too. I should have looked this stuff up. I just didn't intend to talk about it. But I've heard that they'll let people go on an annual event or whatever, and they'll go out and you shoot the things, cut the tails off, take the tails back, and then you get X number of dollars for however many tails you come back with off your hovercraft, in the swamp or whatever.
I mean, and they're doing that in Florida right now, but just not with mammals, with reptiles, right? I mean, the snake, the boa or whatever. Someone let out a snake go a while back, and now they're just like everywhere.
Yeah.
So now they're paying you for bringing in snakes.
Yeah,
it could be you can make a living.
We'll talk a little more about this later, but the main point to remember there is that when we as humans remove predators to make ourselves or our livelihood safer, you mess with the ecosystem. And when you do that, pests let's not call them pests. Other animals are unchecked because their predators are no longer are eating them and keeping them in control. So they proliferate just maddeningly. I mean, you've heard the term fucking like rabbits. I mean, hella different types of, oh, dude, I said it. I said hella. Damn it. A whole bunch of different animals will breed like rodents and will quickly overpopulate. And I mean, just like Rick had said, I mean, those prairie dogs are digging so many intricate holes and tunnels under the land that their farm equipment is falling into the damn ground. I mean, what are you going to do about that? That's a serious problem. You can't, anyway. So that's where that stuff comes from is, on one hand, we started it. On the other hand, we can balance it. And that's the important point we want to emphasize on that particular type of hunting.
And biologists and game wardens take careful count of the population, so they know how many animals can be harvested or removed to maintain a healthy ecosystem.
Yep.
And it's not just the predators, but they also understand, okay, if we remove X number of predators, they're going to not take down this much prey. That is eligible for hunters to take, and we can keep everything in check. And also, too, they understand how much area each animal needs. So if the green belt gets shrunk and is urbanized, they now have to remove those animals. Otherwise, that's how you wind up with, like in Folsom, California, you've got mountain lions and turkeys cruising the street because we've encroached on their natural habitat, and they have nowhere else to go.
Yeah, it's pretty common to see. I can't remember if they're called flocks, but groups of turkeys together out here. They'll come through and they'll tear apart your lawn or.
Yeah, we have them even in our neighborhood.
Yeah, they're everywhere. We have huge groups of turkeys.
It's cool seeing
sometimes.
them on people's houses.
They're cool until you mess with them, dude. Those guys,
they're
those guys,
vicious.
when they're by themselves,
Yeah, them toms can be pretty aggressive.
dude. When they're with their buddies, forget
yeah.
it, man. They will mess you up. They're not afraid of you at all when they're with their friends. Very important to note: this is not poaching. Poachers are not hunters. That's a whole different story. One of the takeaways that you should, if you take anything from this, is that hunting, as defined, is an ethical and oftentimes sanctioned by either government, science, conservation entities. And done for a specific reason. And obviously, some people have an entertainment value for it and or sport value for it, but nevertheless, it is a whole lot different than poaching. Poaching is extremely illegal, extremely frowned upon, and we'll talk a little bit later as we get into some of the crazier things that people hunt. How the efforts work to try to eliminate as much poaching as possible. All right. Rick kind of alluded to it already a little bit. There has been, but I want to play a little bit off of that. There has been a huge, I don't even know if I want to call it huge. It's notable, though. A shift in popularity in hunting, in hunters in this country. It is on a noticeable decline. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is the federal entity that tracks this, and they do offer... I believe that they communicate with all the state entities as well, but they're the ones that monitor all the permits and tags and stamps that are issued to hunters to allow them to hunt whatever they're going to hunt. And as of, let's see here, in 1991, there was 7.3% of the U.S. population was, I guess you could say, registered for hunting by some means or another. That was about 14.1 million. That is now down to 4.4, which is 11.5 million, and that was in 2016. So there's been like a 3% drop, millions of people in the last 91, 20 years?
Yeah.
I can't do math right now.
I think it's the culture has changed because... I don't blame it specifically, but kids would rather play their Xbox or PlayStation than even go outside. So if you're not going to spend your time outside, then you start to devalue the gifts of outside. And if you're never outside, then why would you want to go even farther outside to experience hunting? I can't say that's the largest contributor to that, but I know.
I believe it's a contributor. Rick, you had some other.
Yeah, there's also like an anti-hunting kind of movement or concept coming about, and I think that most of that stems from like a what do they call that? Yeah, animal rights activists and stuff like that, like PETA. They think of the entire concept of hunting as just shooting Bambi's mom, right? Now, if you think about it, it's like, okay, well, I kind of see where they're coming from. Their heart's in the right place, but I don't think that their mind is. They don't think far enough into the
positive
the
benefits
mechanics
from
of it?
hunters.
Exactly. Like they don't see the whole picture. All they see is that there's some mean guy out there that wants to shoot animals because he's a jerk. And I think that's the leading shift in the hunting culture or the decrease of it, especially in more populated areas.
Yeah. One thing I like to know, the number is still, it is down. And I think what I mentioned is definitely a contributor. But if you look at the, percentage-wise, it's down, right? Ben gave you the statistics for the percentages. But our country has actually grown in population. And if you look at the number of registered hunters, it's still significantly large. That number did go down, but not as big as the percentage went down when it went from 7% down to 4%. But the number in the millions, it didn't go down as much as it seems.
Yeah.
And to kind of counteract it, because it was listed on the, again, most of the stats I'll pull here are from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is, again, the federal entity that manages this stuff. They note that there is a noticeable rise in wildlife-centered activities. And this kind of speaks to the change that's happening that kind of, and probably plays off of what Rick had mentioned, but the change that's happening within American society and attitudes towards wildlife in general. And those rises are specifically in bird watching, hiking, photography, all kinds of outdoor activities that it is becoming more popular for people to partake in. The trick, though, is that are these people, or can we get these people to begin donating more and more to land preservation organizations to make up for, which we'll get into in a minute here, how much comes from, or how much funds are generated from people hunting? It's pretty difficult to license or permit somebody who wants to go take pictures of birds or just look at birds or go for a hike. How do you do that? Now, some areas, I know out here we've got Desolation Wilderness. Mm-hmm. Before you can go, it's a real big empty area, and it's desolation and desolate wilderness. Before you can go in there, you are supposed to register for a permit, and in that time, of course, you're going to pay for that permit. But it's also a safety thing because you'll tell them, hey, this is how long I'm going to be out here. This is how many people we have. This is the kind of gear we're packing. So if you don't come back in 7 days when you say you're going to, they're like, yeah, this person never came back. So they'll actually go out and look for you. So in that sense, it's a safety thing. But the important part is it's generating some money. Now, where that money goes, if it works to preserve the land that you're hiking on, or if it goes to a general fund for parks and recreation, maybe for California State, I don't know. But nevertheless, finding a way to get money from these people to make up for the decline in hunters is going to be the next trick. Because, like I said, a lot of money comes from this stuff. Let's see. And with respect to making up that money elsewhere, before we get into how much actually comes from hunting there was a number of efforts that have been made and attempted. Some never went through. But I wanted to start off with this because, again, to put emphasis, if people stop hunting, and again, we'll cover how much money goes into saving how much land, that money has to come from somewhere. And it's kind of like the beware of what you wish for, or be careful of the results of what you advocate for. If you want to see less hunters and you don't want to see any more social media posts of people shooting tigers and lions and bears, you have to keep in mind that, and we'll talk later about how much, again, how much money is being lost by those people not doing that. And they have to make it up somewhere. Otherwise, they have to start giving up the land, and none of us want to see that happen. So apparently, Congress is looking into taxing oil and gas revenues as a possible land preservation funding source. Some states have increased their sales tax. Now, think about that. Nobody wants a sales tax increase. Nobody wants any tax increases. We always complain about it. I don't care if you're red, white, blue, yellow, whatever. Nobody likes that. But if we take away the ability to generate the money the way the money has been coming in, you got to make it up somewhere. So some states, like I said, increasing sales tax. Obviously, the first thing they're trying is increasing fees for hunting and fishing. If you're not a hunter and fisher, you probably don't care about that, but those that are into it are like, dude, damn. So they've been doing this for a while now.
Especially if they're already strapped for cash. Like before, you'd mentioned that people are hunting for food because it's a less expensive alternative to harvesting their own meat than driving into town and buying.
A lot of people actually hunt because they want to know what they're eating.
Yeah,
I mean, you go to the supermarket today and you buy your food. I mean, what's in your food? I mean, they inject it with everything. Exactly. So there's an idea that's large in that hunting culture, especially in the subsistence lifestyle, is they know where their food came from. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they know when it came from.
And almost like could be more organic than
it's 100% organic. How much more organic can it get?
Yourself.
Almost like a naturalist type mentality, right? And a lot of people don't look at hunting that way because, especially if we grew up and lived in areas where nobody hunts where I grew up.
Yeah, but if you think about like I understand like industrial farming or commercial farming is a totally separate subject, but if you think about the life of an animal, like let's say a chicken lives,
man.
even in a cage-free, certified chicken factory, they still live in really tight confines. It'd be like you spending your entire life in your bathroom, never being allowed to leave. That's your range-free chicken lifestyle. But if you take an elk or a mule deer that's lived its natural life the way it should be, that animal's had a better life, a better quality of life its entire life before you harvested it.
Yeah, if you get bored, YouTube cage-free chickens and take a look at what the conditions are that cage-free chickens live in. It is nothing any better than them being in a cage. It's terrible.
Right. Or if we stop hunting these animals, there are other options to ending their life are starvation, disease, or being hit by a car.
In some cases, yes. It depends on what you're hunting, I guess. But yeah, in some cases, definitely, especially the overpopulated ones.
Well, hunting is also a form of land management. Wildlife itself, left to itself and wildlife, if the populations aren't controlled by predator or hunter, then the vegetation in the land is going to be changed. And just like you said, when you remove one thing from the food web, something else is going to suffer from that. Yep. So now this area doesn't have enough vegetation. It's more susceptible to flooding and land movements.
Or erosion control.
Exactly.
Man,
or the animal population's grown so much, they're starving, so they're forced to move into the urban areas and eat your rose garden, and they're sick and hurt, so you're going to hit them with your car.
Yeah, which happen to deer all the time. That's one of the reasons they come into neighborhoods or whatever, will tear up all anything vegetation you have because it's all gone elsewhere. Definitely. So the takeaway point on that is that remember, the lack of funds, they got to come from somewhere, and worse than that is when they start selling off land that was previously preserved. Now they'll start selling off to developers, and like when we started off, Matt had said that it's going to be that beautiful land that you had maybe walked through or maybe never noticed, whatever, it was there and it was preserved and was left alone, will now be a damn strip mall. And yeah, we have enough of those. Let's talk a little bit about costs for this for hunting and just in general too. But I wanted to start that off with trophy fees. And for those that don't know, when and unfortunately, a lot of us, the only exposure we have to this is the crap that gets pushed around on Facebook or Instagram or whatever about some dentist somewhere who shot this animal, or some 16-year-old high school girl went out and killed this animal and is proud of it. And okay, well, let's take a step back here. Right off the bat, don't forget to compensate that the ability or the opportunity to go out there and do that. Before we even get into the permission for the opportunity to do that, you have to pay travel expenses. You have to pay for guides. You have to pay for equipment and services to haul a carcass. You have to, and your equipment. You have to pay for firearms. You have to pay for camping, hiking gear. There are expedition costs. There's a huge amount of money just getting yourself there to do your insurance, just to do this thing. So yeah, okay. So what does that mean? Only the rich people can do this? Well, partly, but. I wanted Matt to talk about, too, how to get out there. There's a point system. Describe a little bit about that. I know a lot of it's relevant to California, but I'm sure other states have similar systems in place. So you were talking earlier offline about the elk tag, right?
Correct.
How does that work?
Just like any other animal that's eligible to be hunted during its hunting season, there's a time, a cutoff when you can start and hunt. What type of equipment you can use during that hunt, whether it's this date is specific for bow and arrows, or you may use rifles, or you have to be this age. Elk specifically, there's a point system, and elk is a rare animal to hunt in California, because in California you get it's a one in a lifetime tag. So I currently have points saved up to be able to harvest an elk.
Okay, so how does you earn points annually, or
you earn points annually? So you
get on the waiting list.
So you pay for a tag as if you were going to be able to hunt elk tomorrow, right?
Okay.
But you can't because you don't have enough points. But now you have a point. So for the next 10 years, you've been putting in. So you've gained your 10 points. So you've paid for your license to harvest this animal for 10 years straight, and you have not been able to harvest it.
So you've paid for 10 years for a tag that you are not eligible to use or receive. A tag you're not eligible
to receive. Exactly.
So it's kind of like a layaway program.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you reach that precipice. I've got my points in hand. I'm eligible now. You are still not guaranteed that tag because now basically your name just gets to be put into the lottery. So you are drawn for that tag. So, it could be 15 years. It could be the very first year that your 10 points is available. It used to be 9 points. Now it's 8, now it's 10. So it changes every year. And it also changes based upon the number of tags given out last year that resulted in a harvest, right? Like I said, it's one in a lifetime. So you got your tag. It expires at the end of the season for that animal. If you haven't harvested it, you'll never get that tag again. I mean, you can sell that tag towards the end to a more experienced hunter, and they might be able to harvest the animal in that timeline, but it's once in a lifetime. So if so many tags were given out, so many animals were harvested, to manage the number of animals available for hunters and to reduce the risk that they pose on society or agriculture or the environment itself, they might go, okay, well, we need to increase the amount by 10 more animals because 10 less got harvested last year. So
they compensate.
They're
compensate,
increasing
yeah.
the opportunity for an animal to be harvested because not enough were harvested before. And earlier you had mentioned since you may not get drawn in the lottery for receiving your tag, are you still purchasing the opportunity for a tag and
Every
to be
year?
kept into the
Correct.
lottery?
Correct.
So you paid for 10 years for something. Now you're eligible and you're going to pay every year, let's say, for example, 5 more years before you get lucky enough to receive it.
that's correct.
And it's the same price every year?
Correct. Well, no, those prices go up. Your fishing license and hunting licenses go up. They don't go up substantially every year, but they do go up. I remember, I used to buy a fishing license for $30, and then you buy your 2-pole endorsement for $2.50, and the American River tag for this, and your ocean tag for that. Well, now that same license is like over $100 to get all those tags, and tags do go away. So the California Department of Fish and Game had a tag for the Bay Delta. And that tag was for 10 years. And so if you wanted to fish in a certain environment area, you had to have that tag or that endorsement along with your license. Once they generated the funds that they said they were interested in generating, they deleted the tag. You could still go back and fish there. You just now no longer required that tag
To pay
wow.
extra for it.
to pay extra for it.
So they're just generating revenue to do a project or whatever in the area.
Correct.
Okay.
How much was the elk tag?
I don't remember.
No worries.
100%.
So take away from that. The other thing I wanted to add. Okay, let's say, and even still, I want to keep in mind for everyone. Even if and when you get your tag, you get okay, cool. Here's your tag. Go out and hunt. You may not get anything.
That's correct.
So that's it. That was your one lifetime opportunity.
That one specific animal.
For that one specific animal, you did not shoot an elk, or you did not find an elk, or you guys went out and all the other rest of the money you spent, nothing. You come back empty-handed. So you can see that they have methods in place that control how many people are able to kill what per year, per timeline, per animal, per species, whatever, extremely, extremely well. They have it very well regulated. And again, going through those paths, I mean, you're only getting like people who completely understand the system, who are completely compliant to the laws and those steps. I mean, it just you gotta take into account how you have to appreciate how extremely well regulated this is, and the people who decide how many the numbers, like Rick had mentioned. I mean, you're talking biologists, you're talking wildlife conservationists, you're talking the people who are probably running things like PETA are the ones who are telling these entities, hey, this is why you can only take so many of this animal or this animal at this given time. So I mean, they're still controlling the industry in a sense, at the same time as the other side of the same hand, they're telling you these, they're pushing out these stories, making them all look like bad people.
And on the PETA thing, I don't think I've met or spoke with a hunter that disrespects animals the way that the humane societies would kind of make you think that they have that.
Their projection of you as a hunter.
Exactly. All the hunters I've met have a deep respect for the animals that they hunt, for the environment that they essentially spend their free time in. They're not out there to create a mess. They're trying to preserve it as best as possible. And part of the disappointment of maybe not catching an animal is maybe you do see one, but you let that opportunity go because you've got one tag and that one's not quite right for whatever reason, whether it be too young or too old or too far away. And being too far away, they take great care in making sure that they've got a good, clean shot
Oh, yeah.
for a quick kill. They don't want to see an animal suffer. And conversely, that also spoils the meat.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a clean kill, you're out there for nothing, and now you have to still deal with this, and you've lost a tag that you paid for.
And on top of that, if you only wound the animal, that means guess what? Your ass gets to go run that thing down for as far as it can run, because there's an ethics and a morality to it too. You don't wound something and let it die on its own. You go out there and find it, and you finish the job. So if you wound it, if you took the shot and it wasn't well placed and you wound it, that means your ass is out there looking for it as long as you can keep your people out or keep yourself going. Because anyway, you don't want it to suffer, and you don't want to leave it. On top of that, let's talk a little bit about. So I mentioned at the beginning of this little section here, trophy fees, and I just wanted to throw out a few random ones out there so that you guys get an idea of how much people are spending to shoot these animals to hunt these animals that they are hunting. The average price for a captive lion, and before I give that, I want to describe what captive means. There are large areas of land in this world that are used as conservation. What we'll be talking about the whole time.
Conservation preserves.
Thank you. Conservation preserves, and they will breed specific species of animals on those lands. Now, as they're breeding on these lands, they can control how many of those specific animals are allowed to be hunted. But at the same time, since they can control the area of land and how many are being killed, they can use that as an opportunity to increase populations. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of conundrums in the moral and ethics of hunting. The very thing that a lot of people don't like is the killing of the animal, but that is actually what is allowing that animal to repopulate
to survive and thrive.
So it's like, how the hell does killing it save it?
If I can just touch base. So
go ahead.
I don't know if people here or people listening know who John Stossel is, but he said something amazing once on one of his shows. He said, if you want to save the tiger, eat it. And when people are like, what? And it was like, well, you don't see any shortage of chickens, do you? Because we eat the chickens. And he didn't necessarily mean eat the lion, actually eating it, but he meant the harvesting of it, right?
Yeah.
So that same exact example is hugely in play in portions of Africa where elephants had been poached. Let's talk about poaching too, because hunting is not poaching, right?
No.
Hunters who pay for these tags to hunt these elephants in these certain regions have increased the population of elephants tremendously by hunting them. And how that worked is they paid a huge fee to hunt this elephant, to harvest this elephant in a specific area. So now a tribe who lives in that area is rewarded with this money. So they have money coming in for this elephant. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now that the elephants are a commodity to this group, now they want to make sure that poachers aren't in their environment killing the elephants because they're not paying for it. They also want to make sure the environment is conducive to the best conditions for those elephants so they can make more elephants. So now the environment's not littered upon, it's not trashed, it's kept very well. It's conservation biology 101. Yep. So they're improving the landscape for the animal's successful life. So the hunter itself is the one who has contributed directly to the population increase of those elephants, because the people around have now had to change their social structure to maintain and care for the elephant or whatever animal.
Money off of it.
Exactly. And so the environment's become better for the elephant. The amount of poachers coming in, so the elephants aren't dying at a higher rate because now the poachers are being. I mean, they'll kill over there. It's a little different.
They'll hunt poachers.
We arrest people for doing those crimes. They will kill you in those parts of land because you took that one elephant illegally. That could have destroyed the whole village's life cycle. And a lot of these hunters, when they especially from here, when they travel over there, we're not bringing that elephant meat back. I mean, unfortunately, the guy just wanted to shoot the animal for probably the
trophy,
to say he shot one, to be proud of himself or something. But the reality is that meat went to the village, so they ate the meat too. So it's a positive aspect that people don't really typically look at.
Yeah. Okay. What I keep trying to allude to here is the trophy fees. Again, a captive lion is one that's raised, like I said, on that land preservation, and probably wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for that land preservation and the breeding that goes on there. $10,000 to $35,000 for a trophy fee to shoot a captive lion. Want to shoot a wild lion? Up to $75,000.
Wow.
A giraffe? I don't know why anyone would want to shoot a giraffe, but okay, I guess.
Delicious.
Really? Mm-hmm. Okay. $3,000. That was actually pretty cheap, I thought, for a giraffe, but okay. And
Do they have a great population of them, or do they reproduce really fast?
I don't know. Well, I mean, they're kind of like horses. I don't know how how quickly horses breed, or I don't really know anything about horses.
They're mammals, so they can breed at any time.
Okay, so there you go. The other thing, so yeah, if they're not, usually the rarity of the species drives the cost up, right?
That's what
so
I
I mean,
asked.
there's a couple of them that I left off of here that were like wombats or something. They were not that expensive, But and then so keep in mind these trophy fees are in addition to all those costs I talked about earlier that are associated with it, and they're usually in addition to any stamps, permits, or what's the other term? Tags that are needed to hunt these animals. So this is just cool. You actually got one. Now you owe us more money. An elephant is $20,000. Crocodile, $4,000. Hippo, $4,000. There are some really, really rare ones out there, and again, a lot of times the ones that these geographical areas allow to be hunted are ones that are bred on conserved lands for this purpose. A white rhino is one of them, which is an endangered species, but again, these ones wouldn't, like the chickens, they don't exist unless somebody is paying to breed them so that somebody can hunt them, which is freaking weird to me. But
And I imagine these are all guided hunts, so they
Yes.
let you know which animal you can take and which one you can't.
And you're paying for those guides too, by the way. Yeah. Killing a white rhino has a trophy fee of $125,000. So like what Matt was saying, yeah, they'll kill the poachers to prevent them for free killing the white rhino because they know they're going to bring some rich individual over who's going to pay $125,000 to shoot a white rhino.
Yeah, which is a lot here. It's
tremendous amounts. It's millions to them over there.
Exactly. It's a lottery.
That's like the village's lifetime earnings, right?
I mean, yeah, probably multiple lifetimes, dude. There's even rarer, a black rhino, which is critically endangered. But again, these are only ones that are bred for this purpose. $350,000 to shoot a black rhino. And those funds are, like we said, used to further preserve and anti-poaching efforts, just like Matt described, which I thought was, I did not expect that at all. Like, pay these people so that they understand if they stop the poachers who are making nothing off of this and stealing from their area and themselves and their people, their village or whatever, these people will pay more. Now you're on our side. It's like, that's awesome. Well, the things that the mighty dollar will do.
Poachers are wasters. I mean,
Yeah,
poachers aren't there.
exactly. Those are the people who would chop off the shark fin and let the shark die just so they can make shark fin
Absolutely,
stew.
yeah.
That's
Or kill the elephant to get the tusk.
just the tusks. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of people you don't want them messing with these animals anyway. Any way you can stop that is a better thing.
Or even stateside, if they're taking deer without tags out of season, that's throwing off the population count
Yep.
that the biologists and the wildlife wardens were counting on.
It doesn't give the animal a fair chance to reproduce.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or could fuck up the
Repopulate.
ecology of the environment.
In particular with the black rhino, I guess that geographical area that does, I didn't write down the name. It was somewhere in Africa. I can't remember what the area's name was. I don't think I could pronounce it anyway. But that area only issues 3 rhino hunting permits per year, and they go to the highest bidders. And that's not necessarily black rhinos. That's rhinos, period, including those super rare ones as well. So there are the most common rhinos. I don't know what their type is. I'm assuming the gray one, but I'm sure there's a real name for it. That's my ignorance in the names of animals is anyway. But only issue 3 of those rhino tags, and they bid them out. So while that black one in particular went for $350,000 this year, it might go for $500K. In the next 5
if you
10
got
years.
2 rich guys that are competing against
There you
each
go.
other out there, it can go for millions.
Yep. Exactly. Depends on how bad and how rich they are and how much they really want to have the opportunity to hunt that animal. And again, those are trophy fees, so that means that they have actually successfully harvested that animal. It's different than what Matt was talking about with just getting the opportunity to come out there and have your chance. I can't even imagine what the firearm would be that would take down a rhino. What do they shoot those things with?
Probably
Definitely not a
375 H&H is what I'd probably use.
Are those guns that look like double-barreled shotguns, but they're just giant, like 45-70 looking cartridges?
4570 would be something you would probably use as well. Yeah,
thought they would use that
depends on the firearm manufacturer. They could be single shot. I would probably use a Weatherby Mark 7 375 H&H if I wanted to harvest an animal that size.
Interesting. So let's see here. Yeah, big round. I'm sure you got to have a lot of power to push that projectile through something like that. Yeesh. Let's see. The spread of this, I want to talk a little bit about more into the benefits of what hunting brings us. It kind of started spreading with Roosevelt. He passed legislation in 1937.
I'd say it absolutely started with Roosevelt.
Yeah, well, I guess what I meant there by saying that was that more licenses, stamps, and permits got created and started being pushed out in more areas for more things, starting with Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. Before that, there were still some licenses that existed. I think all the way back to 1800, early 1800s, they had started with that, something like that. I can't remember. I didn't write that down, but I was reading way long before the 37 Act got passed that Roosevelt pushed out. There already was some licensing permitting in place, but only certain states, only certain areas, only for certain things. It was very little. Mm-hmm. When he made that push, it started spreading everywhere because everywhere realized, wait a minute, there's tons of money to be made here, and we can do good with this money and support probably the hobbyists at the time or whatever, the people who were into that.
As I understood it, the concept was to fund the Conservation Act, right? And
yes.
They needed to get the funds from somewhere, so that it was essentially like a use tax for hunters to pay for the conservation.
And Matt had already mentioned the duck stamp, which is one of the very most popular ones, which is essentially the license for waterfowl hunting. Since 1937, 6 million acres of habitat have been preserved because of that. That's massive.
Yeah, that's 6 million acres of land that would not have been set aside for the protection of wildlife had it not been for the hunter who wanted to harvest the exact wildlife it was protecting.
And it would be a movie theater instead of a wetland marsh.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I found that they generate $11 million a year from the duck stamps.
Dang.
In California.
In California only? Okay.
No, that was a rhetorical or a question.
I thought it was nationwide,
okay.
But I don't recall seeing that specified.
Yeah, and more than just the animals that are preserved on that land, it's also the trees, it's the plant life species, it's various types of like wetlands,
insects, the frogs.
There's all kinds of stuff that gets preserved when you just leave land alone. It's much more than just the animals that are there. And we know how important trees are to us, right? And so that stuff gets preserved as well. It gets saved. Let me see. Then there was the Federal Aid in Wildlife Restoration Act. It has generated $14 billion since 1937 to land that all went to land conservation efforts. There is, and we were talking about this earlier, and I was hoping Rick could bring a little more in on this. There is an excise tax on firearms, ammunition, and other equipment related to hunting.
Yeah, so there was one that started in 1937. That's on firearms and ammunition. That's generated $12 billion so far since 1937.
Jeez.
Right? And there's another one that was a 10% tax on handguns. Now, this is all handguns, not just for hunting or anything like that. This is across the board. So anyone that buys ammunition, a long gun or a handgun, and that's the handgun one, it's 10% tax on handguns, generates $40 million a year towards conservation. 10% tax on fishing equipment, 11% tax on archery equipment since 1972. That's generating about $20 million a year.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think from taxes and licenses and tags. That's what I'm trying to say. 2013 data said hunters generated $821 million for 2013.
And that's just for
conservation
and preservation.
Yeah.
So that money is being used for that aspect.
Yes, paid for from hunters for the year of 2013 in the U.S. total. That was national figures. I do.
Nice. So, how much did PETA generate to save those?
That was my exact same
I
thought.
did look at that, and I think they were generating like $3 million to $10 million a year, but that wasn't specifically for conservation.
That was to buy T-shirts.
Or to send people out to
stand in front of REI and bug you.
Spray hoses at people that are fishing or whatever,
So people that are eating the animals are generating a far higher dollar amount in the protection of conservation for the animals than the people that don't want you to eat the animals.
Absolutely. And those figures that I had mentioned earlier, those are all federally generated funds, right? And that's not including nonprofit organizations like Ducks Unlimited and hunter organizations like that generate far more money. I don't know, you might be able to tell us if these are privately owned lands that are used for, like Ducks Unlimited would purchase, and then they would have expeditions out there or conservation on their own?
So like Ducks Unlimited or Wilderness Unlimited, Wilderness Unlimited manages a lot of property in the state of California. And so you have 50 acres out here at the corner of Lincoln, and you have your little house and your farm or whatever your farm or not. The area itself is conducive conditions for animal X, right? So we'll just use ducks. So you have this huge pond or a wetland area that you're not farming, but it's part of your farm. The animals come there. So Wilderness Unlimited or Ducks Unlimited will pay the landowner fees to use that land and protect that land for the hunting of the animals. And then members of their organization will be allowed to hunt on those properties. So a lot of the times it is extremely private lands that you and I can't just wander onto during hunting season. But there are much larger public lands that both of those entities, produce monies for.
Cool.
I was actually surprised when you guys had mentioned the. I didn't realize that there was a tax built into firearms for this stuff.
Yeah.
For those that have never purchased a firearm, when you buy it, I mean, yes, there's fees for the background check and the transfer and yada yada yada. But apparently, there's I guess I don't want to call it a hidden fee, but an added fee that we are paying. It was just in the price of the firearm. I mean, I didn't even know where the money was going. That's awesome. That makes me feel even better now that hey, cool. Anyway, I did not realize that. I wanted to say here too, 59%, $3.3 billion of state wildlife agencies' conservation funds comes from hunting and fishing. And that's the federally generated amount that's allotted to the state entities. However, I like this a lot. I saw a lot of checks and a lot of limits that are placed on this money that gets generated. For example, the duck stamp, I think it was like 98% has to go towards land conservation. So they really have their overhead amounts and the misappropriation of funds seems to be under control.
Yeah, that was written into the law.
Yeah, and they're very, very clear in giving that information out in states. A lot of times it looked like they were flat out proud to say that stuff, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, we're not wasting this money. This is the percentage that's going into what we're claiming it's being used for. So in kind of along those same lines, and in addition to that, when any state entity like California, for example, applies to get some of this, $3.3 billion from the federal state wildlife agencies conservation fund, they have to match 25% or more of what they're requesting. So that's kind of cool. I mean, because it's like,
you can't just like, hey, give me some money, I'm gonna do a project over here. It's like you should be invested in that project.
You got to throw
yourself.
down too. Yeah. So that was kind of cool.
Have a dog in the hunt, if you will.
That's it. That's exactly. So it hurts them, or takes from them just as much as they're asking to take from the rest of the country, right? I think Rick had already mentioned charitable events and auctions. I mean, this goes all the way down to your local mom and pop church, all the way up to NRA and
Gun Owners of California,
anything,
Ducks Unlimited.
Man. I mean, all these entities have charitable events and auctions that they throw off together, and that's some of that stuff is really cool. If you're into firearms and you get into one of these events, right? A lot of times they'll auction off just a standard firearm that you can get anywhere else. But the cool thing is that it was donated to them. So let's say you're going to buy a $500 handgun and they happen to have it up there for auction, and you win the auction at $550. Okay, fine, you paid a little bit extra. However, that whole amount went to donating to these land preservation things, and the nonprofit isn't worried about it because they were given that firearm to auction off. So rather than just giving the $550 to the gun shop, down the street, you've given it as a donation and gotten the gun you wanted anyway, or other stuff. It's not just guns that they auction off. I mean, sometimes it'll be iPads or whatever the hell.
It's a huge range. I know, like one of my favorites is RMEF, which is Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. So all of their money specifically goes to the preservation of lands where their animal lives.
The elk.
Mm-hmm. So their dinners are amazing. So sometimes it's Gun Owners of California. That's another organization. you buy a dinner ticket for a huge dollar amount, but it actually pays your membership fee and you get your prime rib dinner. And then they have gun auctions, but it's like,
They do crab feeds too, right?
Yeah, oh, they do it all. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's amazing. But you spend $100 on raffle tickets and you could win, a $1,000 gun. So initially you could win $1,000 gun for $100, but like Ben said, the $1,000 gun was donated to them.
Yeah.
Anyways, they're a 501c3, so
Yeah.
they're a nonprofit. They got the gun for free, and somebody else got their write-off, the gun value off of their taxes.
Yeah, I was just going to say too. I did not to promote IRS loopholes, but this is what Rich and people like everybody else can do too. If you win one of these auctions, what it looks like or what you can claim on your taxes, and again, I'm not promoting anybody to do this, but you can claim on your taxes you donated $550 or whatever the price of that winning auction was to a nonprofit organization, and that's it. Nowhere in there does so. Well, in some cases, you don't have to claim that there was a prize associated with that auction donation or with that donation.
That's a sticky loophole.
Yeah,
though.
you have to be careful. I'm not
Because if
promoting
there's a
that,
physical,
but
I think if there's a physical raffle ticket involved in it, like here's your ticket number 105, and if we call 105, you're the winner. If you got that ticket, that's not a donation. You were in some form of lottery at some.
but then how they prove that, right?
It's like slippery.
Yeah, it's a gray area, and you probably shouldn't mess with the IRS. But anyway, people have done this in the past. Not advocating it, just saying. Let's see here. Oh, okay. So I had written this. Tried to write in my notes here the section of about the some of the benefits of what hunters provide here, and we had already kind of mentioned this, and I had saved it for this. I wanted to save it for this section, but we already went into it, and that's population control. Human beings have created an imbalance in many different ecological areas for specific species by killing off predators. And when you do that, like we already talked about, other animals will take over. And if you don't live in an area where it's a problem, yeah, great, you never experienced it. But like for example, the prairie dogs Rick was talking about, and sinking your damn barn because they're like termites, under the ground, or
They're an invasive species,
Yes.
right? And then they also have problems with
Get your hand out of my pocket.
humans bringing invasive species in, and they take over. Like they have wild pig problems. They weren't native to Hawaii, but they're all over the place, and they're dangerous out there.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Through some shipment or something, they ride over on a boat or something, and there's no natural predator in the area, and all of a sudden you've got these things attacking your children and your dog or whatever.
Tearing up the farms.
Yeah. Yep. The turkeys that are unchecked or ripped. I mean, that's a minor inconvenience, but those things will trash your whole front yard. I mean, they'll roll in one morning while you're asleep and destroy everything.
That's an inconvenience if they tear up your lawn, but if they tear up your farm, which is your source of
Livelihood,
income,
yep.
that's a bigger problem.
Exactly.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's perfect.
Yeah, the invasive species was what I was just getting ready. I was going to spit that out because that's another reason why certain hunts are given or certain agencies are brought in to delineate or dispatch or delete the populations because they don't have a natural predator here. Mm-hmm. So they come in, they destroy farmland or whatever it is that they're harming the environment, or they eat another species that wasn't normally disturbed by their presence. Mm-hmm. So because they have no natural predator, they have to be. Hunting is the biggest way to impact the environment.
We have to
Balance
become their
the
natural
scales.
predator.
We have to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, the last thing I've got on here, guys, unless you've got more topics you want to do, talk about, or more things you want to talk about afterwards. I wanted to ask you guys and see what you guys thought, kind of around the table or whatever. Do you guys feel that the skills necessary in this day and age, necessary to hunt, are worth learning nowadays? And before we go around and answer that, I just wanted to emphasize that there are still Girl and Boy Scouts, many of them, and those people focus on, from an early age, teaching children how to survive and all kinds of other useful skills. Mm-hmm. How do you guys feel about learning the skills to hunt?
I think it's necessary if you're going to add in that to your survival training. I mean, there's I don't want to be like a doomsdayer, but there could be scenarios where you can't go to the grocery store, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the end of the world apocalypse. It could. In Nebraska right now, which is not being talked about in the media heavily, it's almost all underwater. It's a very flat state, and it's extremely flooded. When you have floods or natural disasters like hurricanes, Hurricane Katrina, when the infrastructure is damaged to a point where your normal grocery store is not restocking its shelves.
Which doesn't take much, right?
It doesn't. One small event, you know.
few roads knocked out can knock out your grocery store.
Absolutely.
Literally that easy. If they get washed away, you're done.
So not just be like the doomsday, but it'd be nice to have a way to put food on your table.
Or at least the knowledge, right?
But I think a bigger thing that comes from hunting is, we talked a little bit about the things hunters do that preserve the lands, the things that they do that make the proliferation of the animal's breeding process stronger and better. But there's another natural thing that hunters do. They appreciate the environment. I mean, they're not out there throwing cardboard all over the place, leaving their scraps of metal and their cartridges from their firearms. They're very conscious about their impact in the environment while they're in it, as well as once they've harvested their animal and have left the environment. So it's a huge thing to be able to go in an area and see this, majestic state that we have here, or some other state that you may live in. To appreciate that while you're out hunting is a huge reason why these people have these large conservation funds. It's because they don't want to necessarily just protect the animal they want to harvest. They want to protect the area where it breeds for their own aesthetics value, that they place upon it.
Well, one of the things I'll say is growing up in Indiana and then moving to California as an adult was like flipping a switch in a room.
Like a culture shock, right?
Huge culture shock. And the way people perceive guns, the way people perceive hunting, everything kind of blew my mind. It took a lot of adjusting. And, Rick was bringing up a point about urban areas and where if people live in a major city like, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, things like that, it's easy for those people to have an opinion that's different from somebody who lives in Nebraska. I have relatives who own lots of land in Nebraska who are having a lot of issues right now because of a lot of the flooding that's going on in the Midwest. But when you live in these environments where you don't need to specifically hunt your food, know how to, take an animal apart to eat it.
Or there's not even a place to do that.
Well,
right?
there's not even a place to do it. So it's completely removed from your existence. So it's easy in that mode to say, well, I don't see a need for it. We don't need to do that. But what those people are forgetting, and I think this is one of the things that drives me crazy about a lot of like super left-wing liberal people, especially in the PETA world, we've talked about this before too, they say, well, there's no need for this. See, we're living without this. We don't need this. Well, that's you and your environment. That doesn't mean somebody in another environment. And you can't close your mind to what other people need to do to survive in other areas. Everybody lives in a different situation. But to me, I think removing these basic skills, just like Matt was saying earlier, it doesn't take a lot of an environmental disaster to change the food chain where 7-Eleven no longer has your food, Rayleigh's no longer has meat on the shelves, all these certain things. So if you don't know how to survive, and I'm not saying that I'm not a doomsday prepper kind of person, but if you look at just regular natural disasters and what we're dealing with in climate change and our present world, there's a lot of things that could happen really quickly that could leave you starving. Mm-hmm. So I think that hunting is a valuable tool for anyone to have in the basic survival as a human on our earth. But I also understand this view of somebody going, oh, well, these animals are cute. And you ever notice it's always the cute animals that they want to save? It's not the ugly ones like the snakes. Nobody wants to save a snake. I get that. Because it doesn't have a pretty face on it or whatever.
Save the snakes,
Save the snake. Don't save the rattlesnakes. But it's easy for those people to have this opinion because it doesn't necessarily involve their life. But also when you're somebody in like San Francisco who doesn't need to hunt or doesn't do that because you think that you're always going to have this reliable food chain of food, it's also very racist and bigoted of you to tell somebody else in a completely different environment, location, and life-structured situation what they should or shouldn't do.
Yeah.
That goes back into like, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Don't tell me what to do. I'm not hurting the environment. As we've talked a lot about in this topic, I grew up around hunters. My cousins, they all hunt. They all have land and all over, southern Indiana. And they're very cautious about what they do with the land, how they treat the animal, how they treat the area. If they're out there shooting and hunting, they're not going to leave a bunch of trash there because that scares the animals away for future hunt. Mm-hmm. So they're a lot more cautious about it. I see people in San Francisco who have, bumper stickers all over their car about the environment, throw trash everywhere they go when they go to Golden Gate Park.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a huge dichotomy of the difference of opinions, but I think that it's a valuable skill that we should learn because it is something. And just like, when we talk about the hunters or people who live out in these really remote areas that hunt their own food, they know what they see that animal grow up. They know.
I think if you made most of the those we'll call them very urban or inner city areas, soccer
Yeah.
moms, if we made them harvest the chickens for the chicken nuggets that they give to their kids,
Right.
instead of going to the McDonald's drive-thru,
Yeah.
they would actually understand the chicken a little bit more, but
Yeah.
also appreciate and understand the environment that it takes to harvest and grow that chicken.
Absolutely.
Before
Absolutely.
it's
and those people who make those sort of opinions, like the soccer mom situation, where they have do this, and they have these heavy opinions about everything. Their impact on the environment and the ecosystem is 1 trillion times more destructive than the average hunter will ever be.
I agree.
Yeah, and for me, I'm not a hunter, and this weekend was my first event doing anything like that. But I think that that hunting has been a large part of any culture on this planet, right? Recently, due to commercial and industrial farming and stuff like that, we have a great separation from what the meat is, or even the vegetables, like how we get our food to us.
We don't identify the source either.
We don't. There's no face to it, right? So no one knows really where this comes from, so it doesn't have the same value to it. So to answer your question, I feel that there's a great I think that's a great skill that everyone should know how to do, how to harvest your own meat, how to butcher it, how to keep it clean and care for it so you don't get sick, But furthermore, I think that if people saw the face to their animals that they harvested, and they would have a greater respect for the food that they eat, I think we'd have a lot less food waste in our country.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
If everyone was responsible.
If you had to work for it, I mean,
exactly.
You wouldn't be like, oh, you only ate your French fries and now you want your toy. We'll just throw the chicken nuggets away because McDonald's has 1 billion of them.
And you had to go out there and cut it. You had to go out there and kill it. You had to clean it. You had to prepare it. You're not going to throw it away.
Absolutely.
You earned that. You didn't just buy it and it will get more on sale later.
Yeah, it definitely very much taps into the primal existence of what it is to be human.
People used to be a lot thinner in this country.
Yeah,
well, that's one thing I was
when
gonna
we
say,
were
too.
hunters, when we were major hunters. I mean, and it's not even that far ago. You go 50, 60 years back, and a lot of people put a huge portion of their yearly meat in their freezers from physically hunting it themselves.
Yeah.
So then you were like, okay, I hunted a deer. I got my deer. He's in my freezer. Now he's going to last me this many months. So you would, kind of like proportion your daily value of eating to make your meat last as long as it could, right?
Yeah.
Now we just throw stuff. Oh, we get this huge big plate of spaghetti and all this other
So it's
food
only
because
$3.
Yeah, it's just going to come back and
It's crazy to think how much of the stuff that we survive on, we know absolutely nothing about what's in it. Like, I love the example of the chicken McNuggets. What the hell part of the chicken is the chicken McNugget, right? No.
there's no
Nobody
chicken.
knows.
It's all the trash.
there's no
that's
chicken in
smashed
the-
together.
There's no McNuggets on that chicken.
Or look at the size of chicken breasts. They look
Oh.
like all the women in Southern California. You got skinny thighs and huge
You go to
breasts.
Miami.
That animal would not survive in
I like
the wild.
I like my women like that, not my chickens.
It's a funny thing too, because it's like the amount of hormones put in our food
dude.
is incredible. And I don't want to sound like a pervert thing, because I have children, I have daughters, but the growth factor of young girls these days is tremendously different than when I was in 6th grade.
You're getting into
you
a whole
didn't-
other topic, dude,
you know-
but I know exactly what you're talking about. It's affecting humans.
It's affecting humans. I
It
mean,
is.
all the hormones they put in their chickens to make the chicken breast bigger. I mean, you eat that. I mean, men are getting more feminine body shapes because of the
It's because
freaking
of the
food we
soy
eat.
too.
The soy,
But,
yeah.
Soy is in
another
everything
thing
now.
I was going to bring up too, something my brother does. My brother lives in northern Indiana, right at the Michigan border, and there are tons of small ranches and things all over the area. He with some other people he works with started buying meat from an individual ranch. And so every year he goes in and he buys like a quarter of a cow or a half a cow or something like that, and they'll butcher it up at the farm, and he'll come pick it up and say, "Oh, I want this, this, or that," and he'll buy for specific things. It costs him $300 to $500, I think, each time he does. He does it like once a year. He has enough meat literally to eat for almost a year in his freezer, and it's not from a grocery store. It's not processed through something. It's from animals that he can drive by every day and see them in the field eating.
It's worth paying extra for.
Yeah, from real farmers who are actually doing things, and that's something that we're leaving out of the equation. Is in the hunting and food gathering thing, there's a lot more processing to our foods, and going back to hunting is making it a more of a pure existence and a healthier existence.
Yeah. Well, even go back, 20, not even maybe 20 years ago, your local grocery store were still doing a lot of the
were still
processing of your
butchers,
meat.
too.
Yeah, they were the butchers, exactly.
those real
they
butchers,
got
yeah.
big chunks of meat and they process it into the sizes and portions and cuts that people, they individuated it out. You don't even find that no more. I mean, the processing plants are now huge corporate, big, and it's like
That's what's amazing about Europe.
It's like that might be a little not good meat, but let's cut that off and put it in this package and still send it.
And we'll inject it with something and smash it together and put some food coloring in it, and whammo.
Right.
There you go.
The pink McDonald's sludge.
Right.
But I do find it quite ironic that a lot of the people that are anti-hunting and stuff like that, they seem to forget that they're here today because their ancestors were hunters to provide for their family.
I guess they believe that we don't need to do that anymore, but I mean, obviously there's benefits to it here by people still doing it. It's one of the reasons we have so much land still saved and available.
But the spinach that they ate was alive too. It just didn't have a face, right?
Yeah, well,
so where do you draw the line there?
I guess when I can find somebody to come grow a garden for me in my backyard and feed me from it,
Yeah,
I don't have time for that.
The protesters with their leather boots,
Yeah, that's cute.
that came from somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, guys, we've gone a little over time here. I hope you enjoyed that. And again, as usual, I hope if nothing else, it leaves you a little something to ponder. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Show notes and other info can be found at our website, greatdistraction.com. The Great Distraction is listed in iTunes, and we greatly appreciate it when our listeners take the time to look us up and leave us a 5-star rating and review. That helps our show grow and motivates us to continue producing content. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can do so using the email address, greatdistractionpodcast@gmail.com, or via our website. We're always interested in hearing any thoughts, comments, or questions from our listeners. Keeping up on the latest from us can be done in several different ways. You can add us to your favorite RSS feed tracker. The link is available on our website or in iTunes. Or you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Great Distraction, one word, no space. As always, thank you for listening, and thank you for all the support.